Join us in the studio this morning is Daniel Juma. He's the Executive Director of Global Peace Foundation. Daniel, good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Karibu sana to Kenya's biggest conversation.
It's a pleasure to be here today. I remember the first time we had a virtual call.
Yes, we did.
When we were at the heights of Corona. But I'm happy to be here physically.
It's good to see you in the flesh.
To meet, both of you. And of course, Eric is not here today.
Yeah. No.
But I see city, you almost remind me of Wajakoya. They almost look alike. I was wondering whether
has anybody ever told you this before?
It is very strange that here I am making Wajakoya famous.
You should pay for that.
Yeah, it has been said. It has been said. I think it's the beard. Yes, the only thing I like is that headgear that he puts on.
Yes.
If I put that headgear on, what's that thing called again?
It's called a durag.
A durag.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure we can organize. Edna knows some people. Right. So, okay, Juma, Daniel, thank you. I mean, welcome again. It's good to have you here. Looking at important issues. First of all, let's talk about the Global Peace Foundation and what you do. I mean, right now with the Standard Group, then, holding these talks and these fora whereby we can talk about peace building and education. But let's start off with what the Global Peace Foundation does and the activities you're involved in.
Okay, thank you. So Global Peace Foundation is an international nonprofit. We have our headquarters in Washington, D.C., with more than 25 branches all over the world. The Kenyan office was established in the year 2010. And that's the time we hosted the Global Peace Convention, hosted by the former President Kibaki. He requested our international office to set up an office here, and we did that. And may his soul rest in peace. We believe that peace is not just absence of war, and peace is structural, and you need to really have global peace. You must start from the individual. It must start from local. So we address local issues, in the process of pursuing global peace. In Kenya, we have been focused mainly on education, and we use education as a tool for peace building. We believe education is critical. To quote Nelson Mandela, education is the best weapon that you can use to be able to change the world. So we believe that education is at the core of everything, even the problems that we have, even our political discussion, the difficult political discussion. Education has everything to do with the kind of leaders that we elect. The reason now why we are having this country afraid whenever we approach an election is because of education. And that has been said before that countries with high rates of illiteracy, with high rates of high numbers of uneducated people are the ones that are more prone to such kind of violence related to elections. So if we solve our education, if we get more people educated, then we reduce a lot of problems. We become a civilized society, where people go for elections and they understand why they're voting. And they they vote in the morning, in the afternoon they go to work. They don't fight each other because so-and-so was elected. They don't kill a neighbor because so-and-so was elected president or so-and-so was elected MP. So once the citizens understand that the Constitution, for example, gives us that, responsibility to elect our leaders every 5 years. Once you understand that, then you understand that you are just choosing, amongst, maybe like now we're having 4 people. So these 4 people, whoever becomes president, it doesn't matter as long as he is ruling by the Constitution, he's abiding by the rule of law. So it takes education to be able to raise a civilized, society. And also in Kenya, really, we need to have this political discussion. We need to have education, to discuss how to make our education more relevant and be able to solve our problems. So we can utilize education to solve a lot of problems. And that is why discussions like this should be continuous. We need to have continuous discussion on education and not just at a given time. And also we realize that our education, the education that we enjoy, was basically a colonial, it was brought by the colonialism, right? The colonialists. But Africans, even before that, I learned that in my political science class. Even before that, we had our education. So how do we have, an inbuilt, reform? How can we make education work for us rather than make it, for example, punitive? Because we have seen discussions going on, for example, that if you don't have a degree, you cannot be a governor.
Yeah.
You don't have a degree, and then you see most of people are going out there to, for example, to get degrees outside. So how can we make our education better so that our leaders feel comfortable to go back to classroom today rather than go to Uganda, Tim's University, for example?
Right.
Those are the questions that we need to discuss. And this forum that we're having tomorrow is going to give us an opportunity to bring stakeholders together to be able to discuss our education. How do we make it better? How do we transform our education?
And what kind of education are we talking about here? What levels of education do you see pertinent through which this information then can be shared on a regular basis?
I think education is everything. As in, I believe that education should start right from when a child is born.
Yes.
So the family has one of the most, the biggest responsibility of raising a child, educating a child from when they are born. How do you brush your teeth, for example, the discipline, teaching the language, the mother tongue. So it starts from there, then proceeds to ECD, then to primary school, then to other stages. And it has been proven that you can go to school, but you cannot. You don't look educated. So we believe that everything starts from the family. Peace begins from the family. Education and how you socialize a child is starts from the family. So, and that's why, for me, I think education is wide. Other countries do not say that you have to go through this. For example, I know right now we have CBC, being promoted in Kenya. But do you know, for example, that we have other, people, going through, for example, for CGSE and all those foreign curriculum, for example. Do you know that we have people doing homeschooling?
Yeah.
So this is very, very wide, and discussions like this, and especially when we are going through an election, is very, very critical, because we have manifestos. We have these politicians coming with manifestos.
Yep.
I remember before we saw, for example, Kenya Kwanza, they were saying that when they come in, we'll throw away CBC. And then I have my small child who, is already in grade 6.
Yes.
And this guy is saying that they will throw it away. So without consulting me as a stakeholder, we are saying that the parent is the most important stakeholder in education. So if you don't have this discussion, then a politician will come and say that when I'm elected, I just throw this and I'll bring in another system altogether without consulting me, a parent who is the most important stakeholder in education. So we are saying that education is so important to be left to government alone. It's so important to be left to the Ministry of Education alone, that everyone is a stakeholder, from employers, parents, teachers, and everybody else who is going to consume the products that come from our schools.
Countries have ministries of education who run their education, whether it is right from the very primary stages right up to the university levels and so forth. They have curriculums. They are purposed to try and achieve, among other goals, meet the human resource need of the country.
Yeah.
So, where does the Global Peace Forum fit in? What do you do with the educators? What do you do with the ministries of education? What do you do with the practitioners of education to ensure that what you are referring to as peace is made an integral part of that learning process that they have in their curriculum?
Yes, thank you very much. We have, since 2013, since we were established here, we have been working closely with the Ministry of Education in Kenya and stakeholders to be able to look at our system of education. And we had this discussion initially, and I remember even when the current PS, Dr. Juan, was in KICD, we were calling for, transforming of our system of education,
Right.
so that our education system can be able to meet the needs of industry, for example, to be relevant to the aspirations of the 21st century. And that's, for me, I'm of the view that education needs to be continually looked at,
Right.
revised, so that because maybe 20 years ago it was different. For example, 20 years ago kuna wimbo ambayo ilikuwa naimbwa, so many vijana,
na umuongeze na bidii,
Yeah.
mwisho wa kusoma
Utapata
kazi mzuri sana. Yes.
So that time education, the motive for education was basically so you get a job.
Yes.
But education is more than that. It's not just for you to be able to get a job. Education should help you to become a good citizen, to become a responsible citizen. You need to have critical, what they're calling 21st century skills. Education can help you. You can get a job today, but you may not be able to keep that job. It's in education that you can be able to learn how to keep a job. So we have been driving a program in school called Character and Creativity Initiative. So how do you infuse character in the process of learning? How do you encourage, for example, a teacher, when they come to class, spend a bit of time talking to these children. Find out, how are you? Did you have dinner? How is your family? Listen to them. Maybe they have personal problems, and you as a teacher is the first role model that he's meeting. So we encourage a whole relooking at the culture, the school culture. So we're saying that a school should be a safe space for children. And as a parent, if I come to this school, I should be very comfortable that my child is going to come back home a better person. Not you take your child to school, you are teaching him or her, certain skills or how to behave. But when he come back home, maybe he's now doing drugs, he's smoking cigarettes, smoking marijuana, and all that. So it's a discussion that we've been having, and we've been bringing these stakeholders together. Other than Character and Creativity Initiative, we also have something called Leap Hubs. So we urge schools to set up spaces in schools where students can be able, to go in and learn how to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So we have Leap Hubs in schools like Mangu High School, Karibangi North, Moi Forces Academy was our first Leap Hub. So you've been to the iHub. So we wanted to bring in the mindset of entrepreneurship right from school. Because if you do not change the mindset when they're young, there's no way you're going to make an entrepreneur after he's already, left the school system.
Okay, that's a very interesting point that you bring up. But then, one of the things that we've seen over time, and CT, the educator in the room as well, can say, that you find that once you introduce something new, it is very important that the person who is the vanguard of that new thing has also been through, because you say it's very difficult to change the mindset once they've passed, that stage.
Yes.
But then who are the people making, or who are the people teaching? Who are the people introducing? Have they been through a mindset change?
Yes.
Have they been introduced to this new information and this material? Because then doesn't it affect how you learn? We have had the issue with the CBC is that we had teachers teaching the CBC system who were entrenched in the 844 system, for example. Do you see what I mean? So how do you make sure that even with these new things you're introducing, that the person who is fostering them is also of the same mind, who probably came from a generation where certain kinds of teaching and technique had been ingrained or entrenched?
Yeah. So in the Leap Hubs, for example, we work, with the mentors. For example, my patron at the Global Peace Foundation is Dr. Manu Chandaria. So, and he's one of the people when we started, donated computers to the first Leap Hubs. And, he's a consummate business person. He's actually one of the most known business industrialists in Africa. So in these hubs, we, of course, work with the teacher who is responsible for business, studies. But at the same time, we, work, we invite mentors to be able to, practitioners in industry, business people to talk to these students, mentor them on, for example, how do you get your sources of finance in business, for example.
At what level do you introduce this?
We start in high school.
In high school?
Yeah, from one. So so the spaces were established in high school, but it is open to Form 1s, Form 2s, Form 3s, to be able to come in. And we are targeting just highly motivated. Not everybody can be an entrepreneur, but we're looking at those highly motivated students who feels like they don't want to maybe go play football, but they want to, to find out, how do I become a manuchandaria, for example? How do I become the
are you saying they can't play football and become Manu Chandaria?
You can do that. You can do that, and that's why that's why again I am of the view that these pathways that are being introduced in CBC is very, very critical, because we have that child who can play football very well, but he may not be able to be a good entrepreneur. So that child should be socialized, should be encouraged to take that pathway, so that he can excel in his field.
But you're limiting entrepreneurship to industrialization. Must entrepreneurship necessarily be in what we call direct commerce? Must it be in industrialization? No. Football, sports.
Yes.
One of the biggest money earners on the planet.
Yeah.
Are we saying that one cannot be an entrepreneur in that particular field?
I mean, you can be an entrepreneur. For example, if you are a footballer, if you are a runner, and you don't know how to manage yourself, you are not able to manage the monies that you generate, you get from those skills, then it will not help you. That's one of the reasons why you find we have many of our athletes going out there, they're doing very well. But what are they doing with the money? What are they doing with the money? So these skills, I think, are critical. These are critical skills that needs to be taught, and everybody. And I'm thinking, I believe that every field should have those skills. I always say that marketing, which is an important part of entrepreneurship, everyone should learn how to do marketing. Very, very essential. Even for yourself, how do you market yourself? If if you are not a good marketer, you cannot even market yourself. Let's say, and that's why you find some people are single for a long time, because they can't market themselves. They can't market themselves. So it's very critical that you learn these skills. What are you selling?
Right.
And how can you convince that other person to buy it? So these are things that should be taught, and I believe that through these spaces, I think this can be done.
I want to ask this question.
Yes.
What your program does is laudable, it is necessary, and you make for a good partnership. But what interactions do you have with the Kenyan Institute of Curriculum Development? The reason I ask this question, it's a question I ask often. Because if something as important as this, which eventually helps change the way people think, and in essence also helps change the way they do things, if it is taught from the earliest possible stage. I say this because I am looking, again, the analogy is from sports. When you look at any sports giant in whatever field, it is amazing at what stage and at what age they began the sport. If you look at a musician who excels in playing a certain instrument well, it is amazing the age at which. Again, if you look at business people, it's in every sphere. The interests and the abilities can be noticed and can be harnessed from a very early stage. So my question again, how do you associate and relate with the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development?
Yes, so we have we started associating with the KICD from when Dr. Juan was there.
Yeah.
And Dr. Juan he knows us very well, and he attended a lot of our sessions. And even the current, the CEO of KICD also knows us very well. So during the Corona period, when the pandemic, came, when we were not able to do a lot of face-to-face meetings, they were involved in many of the, the virtual calls, virtual meetings that we had. And the resource persons in some of most of the summits or forums we have had come from KICD. So we are working very, very closely with them, and this forum that we have tomorrow is also, I think we expect some participation from KICD,
right?
And of course, Minister of Education, the PS, Dr. Juan is going to be there. So our aim is to involve. Of course, KICD is there.
Yes.
To be able to help in bringing all these policies, so that government can be able to take up some of these things. But it takes, the stakeholders must all come together.
Yeah.
It takes, for example, a non-profit like us to demonstrate that this is working, that this is possible. When we started that, for example, when we started doing LEPAS, for example, we did not know that CBC will be actually taking up this thing.
Yeah.
And right now, as you know, in junior secondary school, I don't know whether you know that in junior secondary school, entrepreneurship is one of those subjects that will be introduced.
CBC.
And for them, so we are using this experience we are already having in schools to demonstrate that it is doable. So ours as a non-profit, we can create models, but at the end of the day, it is the role of government to be able to deliver these things, to deliver education. So what we do is basically catalyze, say that this can happen, get people to bring in different ideas, so that at the end of the day, government can pick which policy that they want to implement. Yeah.
All right. Let's take a break at this point. It's 7:30 on the nose. Kenya's biggest conversation continues. In the room this morning with Daniel Juma, who is the Executive Director of the Global Peace Foundation, and we're looking at transformational education, in essence, to promote certain things in the country, and that we can see that it's absolutely possible to have a change, mind shift change, if you do that through education.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Daniel Juma in the studio, who is the Executive Director of the Global Peace Foundation. We're looking at transformative education, transforming education towards certain things in the country. There's a summit that's taking place, and that's starting tomorrow. And it's looking at the role of stakeholders in transforming education for the future. And you talked about one of the most important stakeholders being the parents.
Yeah.
What role do they specifically play in all this, and how will they be involved in this summit tomorrow? And there's a caveat to that question, being that most times parents are given the end result of the decision. This is what we're going to be doing in school. This is how much it's going to cost. This is what you need to bring. You bring your child, and then you bring all these supplies, and then we're going to tell you what we've decided. I have a feeling that you think this ought to be different.
Yeah, this ought to be absolutely different. And that's one of the reasons why, I think parents are very critical. And in tomorrow's conference, we have a few people meeting at the Boma Hotel. But we're also opening it up, virtually. So we will have people participating virtually. So, and we want to welcome as many parents as possible. As I said earlier on, everybody is a stakeholder in education. There is nobody who can pretend that he doesn't care about education.
Sure.
Someone is taking his kids to school. Maybe your cousin is going to school. As an employer, the people who come here, you really must worry about how they were schooled, for example. It's one of the issues that affect employers. When someone comes to my office looking for employment, he has a degree, some even has masters, but they can't even write a simple letter. A letter has grammatical and spelling errors. They would not even be able to work with, with their fellows. The teamwork, when it comes to an environment like this, you're going to find ladies. How does he, interact with them, for example? Do you just look at them as women, or do you respect them? So education is very, very critical. So parents must play a very big role, in the education of their children. And the current system, the CBC, is actually involving parents in doing that. I personally, every day when my daughter is doing homework, I get involved. I have, sometimes my daughter is asking me questions that I cannot remember. As you know, I'm growing old, but now she's asking me this. So I have to Google and find out the answers and be able to do that. So, and that's one of the reasons why we are saying that they are an important stakeholder. They must be involved. As I said earlier on, education is so important to be left to MOE alone. Even the decisions that are being made by government, must involve parents as stakeholders. And right now, it's very important that we have this discussion because right now there's a political discussion. People are actually going to vote, and education is on the ballot. As I said earlier on, we have, of course, parties who have expressed intent to actually even abolish the CBC, for example. But of course, later on, they were able to retract that. So if we do not have this discussion, then you're going to have a fellow coming in as president and imposing something that you may not agree with. And that's one of the reasons why, as I told you, for example, that there are parents who are doing homeschooling. They're teaching their kids at school. So it is important to have all this, discussion so that we open up education. I believe that education should be democratized. Education does not have to be how do you call it? It should not be any of the few. Everybody. At the end of the day, every government, goal, objective.
It's a right. At the end
it should be a basic right.
It is.
And every government's objective should be that everyone should get education from primary school to university education, so that we stop idea of creating a class that we have. Other people who are educated in this country and other people who are not educated. For example, do you know, that when you try to politicize education, do you know that a majority of Kenyans do not have degrees? So when you tell the majority that if you don't have a degree, you cannot be, for example, governor or MP, of course, I agree with that. There are good reasons for that. But I think those rules should only come when we have democratized access. So when everybody can access education. But when you have almost 60% poverty rate in a country where everyone cannot afford, where it is affordable for a few, and then you say that if you don't have a degree, then you cannot run for office. But you look at some of those gentlemen who have been struggling, for example, with the IEBC. These are polished people. I've been on a podium with one candidate who is a gubernatorial candidate in Nairobi. He's polished. He's able to to come up with laws in the Senate, for example. The way he speaks himself. You can see that this man is educated, and maybe what he lacks is just a piece of paper. So government policy should be able to address some of these issues, and that's why I am also looking at one policy, for example, was Mio. They're talking about recognition of prior learning. We should stop the idea of making education punitive. If we see, for example, that City is good, is a polished journalist. I know maybe you didn't study journalism.
I didn't.
Yeah, but you are a journalist, so the university should come and give you a degree in journalism.
I think they should.
Yes.
It's not going to
No, yeah, I mean, because it's doing it already, it's practicing it. So why would you say that City should not sit here because he doesn't have a degree in journalism, but he's doing it well already? So these are some of the things that I'm thinking are very, very critical. So when we continue having these discussions, then we can agree as a nation. How do we transform education? How can we make education work for us? How can we make education serve everybody?
Yeah.
Rather than disadvantage other sectors of the society.
When we look at countries that seem to have gotten this education right, oftentimes we quote or we give reference to the Scandinavian countries, Finland in particular, which probably has, one of the best lauded education systems in the world. But the other things that they seem to have gotten right as well. They've gotten the economy right. They've gotten the economy working to be able to fund this very important thing of education. Their teachers are probably some of the highest paid individuals in the world, not in the country, in the world. When you look at that matrix, they pay their teachers better than some of the highest paid professions in other countries. So they've gotten their economy right, and so they're able to give the needed information, or rather the needed attention that education requires, because they see that if you educate your people right from the beginning, you're going to get a set of individuals forming families, forming community, forming society, forming the nation in the things that you're talking about right now. So do you think that then education can be paid attention to without paying attention to other things in the country that clearly need help? You've talked about 60% poverty, 60% debt. Can you do it without the other?
Absolutely. I think education is the most important. Actually, a government that gets its education right, actually, as far as Kenya is concerned, if you get education and security right, then we can solve more than 60% of our problems.
Okay.
And you spoke about Finland, and I'm aware. For me, I've been, I lived in Korea, and in Korea, it is very difficult to become a kindergarten teacher. You must pass very highly, to become a
kindergarten teacher.
Yeah, kindergarten.
What we think is you can just pick up somebody off the street.
Yeah,
and
you
have
cannot,
them,
because that is the formative. At kindergarten, you are teaching this child how to write, how to talk, that kindergarten teacher is the most important in the whole education, spectrum.
Right.
But unfortunately, here in Kenya, we don't look at that. Kindergarten teachers are probably people who did not do well in school. The county government is now in charge of ECD. The people that they hire as kindergarten teachers are probably people who don't have even degrees. And our teachers are some of the lowest paid people. I was talking to a BOM teacher who is a graduate. She has been trying to be employed by TSC for a long time. And I asked her, how much money are you being paid as a BOM teacher? She told me, 20,000. And for the last 4 years. And this is a graduate, for your information. So we do not treat our teachers with the respect that they deserve. If I was a politician, if I was in government, this should be the best paid, people in the country. And other countries have come up with innovative ways of how to incentivize teachers. For example, I think in Tanzania, if you're a teacher, you can ride free in some of those new buses that Magufuli came up with. Before, lecturers and teachers were importing, cars duty free. I don't know whether that is still the case.
That stopped.
So as a government, and I think this goes to the government that is coming, if we do not look at that sector, and find out who are these people in our classroom, for example. I saw TSC, fired, more than 100, teachers. Why? Because you get someone who wanted to be a lawyer and he did not get the A's to do that he wanted to do. Then maybe he got a C or a D, and then he said, fine, go and become a teacher.
Yeah. And
we have those many untrained teachers in the villages. We have not trained them on how to behave. See, these are some of the teachers impregnating girls in class. You get my point?
Yes.
They come to school, sometimes drunk, spilling alcohol. How do you expect this teacher to be able to bring up your child? You understand? So if we don't look at it, if we do not, for example, I'm saying that to be an engineer, you must pass highly in maybe get A's. To be a doctor, you must pass highly in those subjects, biology and all that. But to become a teacher, you don't have to get an A. You just need maybe a C or a D, or if you failed, you wanted to become something else, then you become untrained. So we need to relook at that profession, pay our teachers well, make sure that not every Tom, Dick and Harry can become a teacher, and make sure that it is a profession that is better paid than even some of our politicians. You pay a lot of money to our politicians.
Not some. All.
Yes. You pay a lot of money to these guys. Some of them do not even legislate. They don't do their jobs. But teachers in the village, these teachers are the opinion shapers in the village. Right now, we are going through elections. Teachers are going to work as returning officers, as presiding officers. So if you don't pay them well, they are the ones who will be used by these politicians to rig elections in the village. And then you start, complaining that there's a problem. So in all, this is the sector that any government that is serious about transforming the economy must look at the teaching profession, the education sector.
Mr. Juma, what is actually sad in this country
is
that education actually receives the largest chunk when it comes to the budgetary allocation.
Yeah.
It gets something, 27%
Yes.
of the budget in this country goes to education. Largest. There is no other ministry, no other sector that gets that amount of money. However, the question is always being asked, where does all this money go? Because even now, there's a discussion we were having, it was yesterday in Du,
Yes.
where the minister, in fact, the discussion began last week, The Auditor General has raised certain queries about the traveling
began last
of
week.
the CS and what it's costing. But it's clear that in the absence of that hands-on supervision, all the monies that are given out to schools never gets to do what it's purposed to do. Here you have a ministry where money is paid out to schools that don't exist. Capitation money is given to students who don't exist. So, yes, the money is allocated, but somewhere along the line, it doesn't go to where it's intended. Now, what you say is absolutely correct, because if you look at the countries that have manpower that is enviable, ours is also enviable if you look at it.
Yeah.
But it's often the efforts that parents make, the efforts that individuals make. You will find that teachers are among the best paid in that particular society. And also, the demands, again, for teachers is higher. You simply, say Germany, for instance, you simply don't get a degree and then become a teacher. You have to get to the level of a master's and a specific training education for you to become an educator. Now, surely, when that is the demand, what sort of students do you think they will produce? As opposed to, as you say correctly, ours, where people take education as the last recourse. When you can't get anything,
You become a
that you
policeman
want,
or a teacher.
no, and a priest.
Or a priest.
Policeman, priest, teacher.
Yeah.
Or you join the military. Now, now you tell me, look at all these sectors. Very important.
Very important.
How do you allow these sectors to be characterized by people who didn't actually choose to be there? They are there because that was what was available.
And in the very first place, it's possible that they performed them in the manner in which they performed because of this very same thing that we're talking about.
Yes.
Because adequate attention was not given.
Yes.
Because importance was not placed on priority. So they got into that position in the first place, and then you throw them into this profession whereby they probably needed a little bit more attention to be able to do it right.
Yeah. So that's why, and you said it right. This is the sector that must have, the greatest attention, and for the government that is coming in should give this sector the best attention, because if you don't do that, then you want all these good things, all these manifestos. You will need at the end of the day, you will need people to implement them. But if you don't invest in the people to implement those, the manifestos, and teachers are at the center of ensuring that you have an educated people, an educated workforce that can implement all these things that these politicians are talking about. You can have good ideas, but if you don't have an individual, transformative individual, who can actually take those manifestos and implement them, then you will not deliver.
We like to pontificate in this show about some of the problems we've had in our secondary schools burning and what have you. And I have a theory. I'm an educator myself.
Yes.
That if you trace it back, you will find it began at the time when people who got into education took it because they didn't have any option. It's one of those professions, you cannot be a good educator if you're being forced to do it. Because it is not an easy thing to do.
It is a calling. I always say that teaching is a calling.
Yes.
And teachers I always say that teachers are perhaps the most important people in the society.
Mr. Juma, consider at independence, the bulk of our politicians were teachers.
Absolutely.
But look at the quality of leadership that they provided.
Yes.
It tells you volumes.
Yes.
But also in that time, the profession was held in high esteem.
Yes.
But when we got to the point where we changed God and we started worshipping money,
Yes.
the fact that teachers were lowly paid, the value of teachers and the respect also descended.
Yes.
So teachers became lowly regarded. Now,
Absolutely. So we must make deliberate decisions to actually, and that's why we're having this conversation tomorrow, and we want to have this conversation every year. So every year, we will be having Transform Education Summits every year, where we'll be having this discussion to remind ourselves, to look at the progress made, to say where did we go wrong? How can we do this?
Right.
So that and at the end of the day, another thing that we're introducing in this summit, we're also coming up with something called Transform Education Award, where we want to award one individual or one organization that actually contributed throughout the year to education, to transform education. And other than that, we'll also give commendations, certificate
Right.
recommendations to around 10 individual companies who are doing their best to be able to transform education. We are starting this. We will announce it tomorrow at the summit, but we will be doing it every year so that we stop this idea of, I know, for example, Teacher Dabiti.
Yeah.
He was given an award somewhere in Dubai. You know, but he's a Kenyan. How come
recognition here.
we are not rewarding our own teachers?
Right.
We are not looking at the people who are excelling, who are actually working hard to make education work here. So I'm thinking and that's one of the reasons why we, in partnership with the Standard Group, we also came up with the Great Places to School, which we are doing again every year. So we are identifying those schools that are great. You know, and I said during my speech when we had the last year's Great Places to School, that Kenya is a hotbed of education. That, you know, we should not be sending our children to study abroad, yet we have good universities here. We have good private schools. If you're looking for good private schools, you're going to find them here.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we are not talking about, we are not marketing our own schools. We are spending a lot of money sending our kids abroad. Even our own politicians are going outside to Uganda to get their degrees because maybe there they have made it easier, and here we are making it so difficult. You know, we are making it so difficult. You know, we want you to do what you want, and yet at the city, our universities now have financial problems.
Yes.
You understand? If you democratize education, make it available, and make it easy for these politicians to access the degrees here, then they are able to charge them even more money so that you finance that education. And that's one of the reasons why I must congratulate former President Mwai Kibaki when he came up with, for example, parallel degrees. Do you know the amount of money, for example, the University of Nairobi was raising by people
all
going
these
to
public
fees.
universities
Yes.
raised a lot of money through parallel learning. Yes,
but somehow I don't know what happened. I think we are trying to go back to renege on that because somebody came and say, everybody is getting degrees. The degrees are becoming useless. This is the problem of people, because people who are educated should stop looking at education as the best thing that they can do.
it's not supposed to be elitist.
It should not be elitist.
It should be for everybody.
And like the President Uhuru said one day, we have people like Steve Jobs, for example, who never had a degree. But look at what he has done with the iPhone. You understand? So we need to look at, if we want to be elitist, or we say, fine, how much money can you generate for the economy? You know, you may not have gone to school, but maybe you're doing a business that is employing graduates.
There's another way that you can contribute.
We need to look at it that way. But just saying that we just need degrees, even for degrees that cannot, contribute to the economy, this is wrong. And that's why this discussion is critical. We need to have degrees that can help us be able to generate jobs. We need a system of education that can churn out job creators as opposed to job seekers.
So
this is a conversation that we must keep working. We must keep having, so that at the end of the day, this nation can look at education as a solution, to all the problems that we have.
Yeah. I was coming to the end of this conversation, Daniel. Tomorrow, then, the summit opens. What will be your markers of success year on year?
We will be looking at, for example, the current, and we want to be looking, for example, at the current administration. President Kenyatta next month, will be handing over, hopefully with the election goes. So we want to look at, for example, his 10 years. What did he achieve?
Right.
So we need to judge, what is his legacy on education, for example. What did he do? We are looking, for example, the good things like the 100% transition. People like criticizing the president, but for me, 100% transition is something good. It's making education accessible, available to everyone. We are looking at the issue of exam, for example. Exam before, people were waiting for a long time after exams. But nowadays, you do an exam, I think within 2 weeks,
you have your results.
So these are good things.
Yeah.
So we need to look at the legacy of the president with regards to education. We also want to look at Professor Magoha. What has he achieved during his time in education? Also, Dr. Juan. So that when we are going to elections, as I told you earlier on, even education is on the table.
Indeed.
Can we have those leaders who can continue the good things that we have had, and maybe come up with better ideas. So at the end of the day, we will, other than that, we also want to create this committee for transforming education so that stakeholders can come together and have these discussions
together.
So that at the end of the day, decisions that are being made by government
are
can
done.
be discussed by stakeholders.
Thank you so much for joining us, Juma. It's been a pleasure to have you, and we'll continue watching as things progress.